Hey, what's going on, folks? It's Mike here, and welcome to another section of my advice where I'm going to be talking about some stuff that's really important for high schoolers or students who are about to enter college or university. So, whether you're in the States or somewhere else, this is going to be just a few tips and tricks that I've learned from the perspective of a professor and just looking back at my own experience. So, take it with a grain of salt, if you will, but here are a few bullet points that I want us to consider for this series. So, again, you're going to find this shocking, especially coming from a professor, but my first note of advice to high schoolers and pre college students is that, well, not everybody needs to go to college. And this is going to sound a little bit wild, but with the cost of universities rising, you really need to think about this decision and what your career path is going to be. Now, this is a difficult thing to sometimes project forward, especially if you don't know exactly what you want to study. Again, I'm coming from the perspective of a software engineer, which is a great career that you can take on, but some of you that might have stumbled upon this might have other interests in various fields here. So you do have to take on the very reasonable responsibility, I suppose, of understanding how much college is going to cost you. In some countries, it's going to be free. That's great. And a secondary education is going to be great. But for those of you who want to go into some careers, maybe it's something like a real estate career or something else, you can actually get started early. You can do that without a college degree. There's other paths that you can take if you enjoy, whatever those avenues might be. So if you're not sure, I actually think it isn't a bad idea to also take a gap year and consider what that means. But with that gap year, again, you have to be responsible. Think about what work you're going to do, what you're going to explore, and try to come up with some sort of game plan. You might not find it from this video, but you might be able to figure out from others and sort of cobble together a few ideas. And it's a little bit of a hard thing to do, but you have to be open to willing, I should say, to listen to other folks' advice on this. And oftentimes you might find that good advice from someone who's maybe it's a parent or a relative, or maybe it's someone who's a little bit disconnected. You could ask somebody who's had a career as a software engineer, how did you get to this path? What did you wish that you would have done? In fact, that might be a good way to sort of vet out and look for things. So again, I can try to give you my perspective in this video, but that's something that you can do for yourself. First and foremost, decide, should you go to college? If you want to be a doctor, chances are you have to go to college. But have you tried talking to a doctor and saying, what would you have done differently? What do you think is important for someone my age to consider when looking at a school? Is a gap year a big deal? Those are some things that I think asking folks in the profession might really matter. Now, I'm giving you this perspective of not everyone needs to go to college, again, from a software engineer, which is true. You can learn how to program and have quite a decent career. There have been many famous cases of this, right, from folks like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and so on, who were in college for a little bit but dropped out. But they tend to be the exception. So think about how college could be an accelerant to you learning skills, having a syllabus for essentially getting you to where you need to go. So again, it's something that you really need to think about. Think about the loans that you're taking out. Think about if you're going in-state versus out of state, and if that's going to be a big cost to you. Now that said, I think if going out of state means getting a really good education, that's probably worth it, especially in a career like software engineering, where you can really get a great accelerant in your career and what you learn from good teachers. That is true if you're taking things, seriously and can sort of be on a path to success there. So that's something to keep in mind. And one thing to keep in mind, again, maybe this is my perspective, but take it with a grain of salt, is I remember friends, talking about what prestigious universities they're going to and a fancy school or whatever. If that's not for you, that's okay. If it is for you, great. If that's where you're going to get your best education and spend your best use of time, that's great. But your friends will start forgetting about what university everyone went to in a matter of probably months or weeks, or even if it's years, it doesn't matter. So make sure that you're making the best decision for your growth, so that you can become a person that you want to be in a profession that you want to be if you decide to go to college. So that's my first advice to folks. But for myself, I went to college. I decided it was a good opportunity, even though I was actually getting some professional experience as a programmer prior to it, and maybe there would have been a path without it. But the growth that you undergo and these sorts of things also have value in university or college as well, which I believe in. So the next bullet on here when thinking about college is, again, think about what you want to study. So as you're vetting programs, probably in your maybe junior or senior year of high school, it is worth doing some visits. It's something that I wish I would have done more visits myself, but I think it is good, see if you can even talk to professors. We're quite busy, so you might not actually get in touch with us, but you can try to meet at least folks within the university. Usually there are structured programs for doing college visits. Again, we usually have a chance to often meet with faculty or deans or folks who can tell you, about the program more than a website, right? You get to experience it and maybe have some questions. So I think it's useful to visit the college, try to vet out some different colleges so you can have sort of a comparison. And even if this means just online, because pragmatically it might be hard to travel to lots of different places. But again, I think just viewing their programs, maybe trying to connect with some students. I know there's Reddit boards or Facebook groups or these types of things. You could probably try to connect with current students and ask them, what do they like? What do they not like? And get some perspective of where you should be looking or what might be different about certain schools or universities. I think that some other things that I would have also wished to consider while vetting out schools is, at least in the USA, there's a distinguishment between a university and a college, meaning a four-year school where you can get a bachelor's degree versus a larger research institution. They have various pros and cons, but one thing that you might take advantage of or think about is if you want to get a master's degree, and maybe that's projecting too much forward for you, but larger schools tend to have +1 programs. Even some of the four-year schools will have +1 programs, and sometimes you go do that master's at another nearby university. There's all sorts of stuff that you can kind of look into, see what the unique selling point is of universities. Sometimes there's interesting combined majors. Sometimes universities have lots of folks who are able to double major, and that's part of the curriculum, and it makes it easier to do so. So again, if you're not sure what you're going to do, that could be something useful to just try to understand. If you want to do computer science, but maybe you're also really interested in English literature, right? Some schools have ways to combine those programs. Some schools make it easy to major in both of those fields and complete your studies in 4 years. So again, have a look at those things. So those are just a few pieces of advice here. I'll give a few more later. But I'm assuming most folks are watching this are in high school, or maybe you're a parent thinking about some things for your child or whoever you're supervising to take into consideration. And there are a few things, at least for US-based schools, that are worth taking into account, these ACT and SAT scores. It's a little silly. I'm not a big fan of standardized tests myself, but if there are prep materials that you can do, the reality is scholarships and so on, entry into universities, sometimes they use these as metrics, right? They have to have something. It's probably not a great metric, but taking a little bit of time, maybe a prep course, even if it's a few YouTube videos that you find that can kind of prepare you for this, that are well known and sort of vetted, it's worth putting a little bit of time and effort into them. If you can find a fun way to do it, maybe with friends or 30 minutes every once in a while, it is worth it, again, just for the cost savings and the scholarships that you can get. Some high schools incentivize having high scores for honors programs and these sorts of things, but see what prep you can do. So at the very least, you're familiar with the course format, some of the questions, and this sort of thing. Maybe it's something that you just look on your phone while you're commuting. You can just find some way to be prepared for this test to give yourself the best ability to succeed if that's part of the entrance requirement for the university or college that you're looking at. Again, you can look at average scores and these types of things, but I hate to say it, but these are some metrics that I remember friends who did very well in the ACT got full ride scholarships for. And I had taken, harder classes and all these sorts of things, but it didn't matter, right? This is just the way it was set up. So there you go. But probably more important than, standardized tests is looking at some of these other options here. I'll jump down here to talk to about advanced placement courses or AP courses. Take them seriously if you get a chance, to take a AP math class, AP chemistry, AP history, whatever those courses might be, because whatever you're studying, chances are if you place well on these AP exams, that's time freed in college, or in college, you don't have to take those classes. Oftentimes, and again, that's something you can look at for vetting your school to see if they'll take these AP course credits. So essentially, I knew folks who graduated college in 3 years. That's a 1 year savings. That's 1 year where you could do whatever you want. You could give yourself a gap year after college as a reward, I suppose, or a few months, before you have to start working, or whatever your next journey is going to be. But keep an eye on these things. Even if you're only able to take one or two AP courses, and accelerate yourself, or knock out some of those courses so you don't have to essentially take them again in college. While in college they could be looked at as easy things for the GPA, the reality is you could be saving thousands of dollars and your time taking other interesting elective courses, for instance, and exploring things that you're interested in if you could place out of these AP courses. So that's the bullet point here. But that goes to the second point here on post-secondary courses. Oftentimes you can take at community colleges if they're nearby. Sometimes if you have a university nearby, you could actually take some courses and get college credit. And usually if you're doing this as a high schooler, there are programs so you can take those college credit courses at a cheaper rate. Again, do your due diligence to see if they transfer over, so you make sure that time is worth the effort. But usually there's a way you can, before school or after school, take these classes, or maybe even during the summer if you're able to. There's also much more stuff online these days. Again, do your due diligence to make sure that those credits will transfer, if that's an option you're able to pursue. But oftentimes you're going to be able to save more money. And again, what's more important is your time. I suppose they both go together, money and your time. But it's nice in college if you can have a more relaxed schedule, focusing on the elective courses or your major courses that you want, if you knock out some of these things. And oftentimes it might be the case in your high school, you can take the AP English class or post-secondary English class as an example in place of the regular class you're taking anyways. So you're sort of doing, what you'd be doing in high school anyways. So again, that's something I wish I would have taken advantage of on the academic side. It wouldn't have costed me anything. And again, it would have saved me time in university, so I could have taken more cool and interesting classes. Now, this next point here is something I feel quite passionate about, that I think is of importance, just from the pragmatic reason for why you're going to college, to get training so that you can learn a skill, build up your critical thinking, and ultimately get a job for most folks. So colleges or universities that have co-op or internship programs, especially if they're part of the requirement, I think are a good thing. In general, what that means is that you're going to do some real-world experience, and it should be paid. You should be getting internships and cooperative opportunities, which co-ops are usually just long internships, is a way to think of them, just 6 or maybe 9 months at a time. But again, this also tells you while you're in university, are you going to, or it gives you a peek, I guess, a trial run to see if you might enjoy the industry that you are studying. And it might not always be perfect because the job doesn't always match the degree, but it is at least some metric where you're getting paid while a student. You have a chance to try. And again, having some money eases the financial burden a little bit. And then you come back to your classes oftentimes. What I found for myself when I was a student, and my students that I have now, understanding, why you're learning something in the actual course, or being able to pick courses that align with things that you're interested in that you might have seen or experienced on the job. And sometimes it just makes your courses easier. Speaking from the perspective of a software engineer, if you've spent 6 or 9 months programming at various internships. So I really believe in schools that have internship or co-op programs. I think that's a good thing. It's something to encourage folks to try, even if it isn't required as part of your university, but to take a summer or two. I used all of my summers to be doing something interesting and trying things out. You could also throw in research here as an experience. Again, most universities, most colleges are also going to have research opportunities that you could look at. Maybe it's working with a professor or at a lab somewhere, again, depending on your program. So that's just something else that matters. I'll move out of the way so you can read the rest of the bullet, but the real experience really matters, and it gives you an edge when you're looking for those full-time opportunities outside of college. Students that I've known who have graduated from programs with co-op sometimes come off with a year and a half of real world experience. And you can imagine that versus another student coming out of university with no experience, right? So you've often worked with employers. Many times those employers will hire you as well because they'll have seen your work, gotten to know you. And the expectations usually when you graduate after a 4-year degree are that, yeah, this person needs to learn more skills for the job. So they'll have a little bit of a ramp up period. But imagine getting that person plus a year or so of experience. Um, and for yourself, you've got maybe a year of salary that you've built up. You'll have some confidence moving on into the real world. So again, it's just a win-win. And sometimes the co-op or internship program gives you a chance to live in different places while you're a student and try that out. Maybe try different cities, even outside of your university or college that you've chosen, right? Maybe you've chosen a university close to home for whatever reason, or in state again, but maybe that internship or co-op gets you out from home where you get to explore some other new opportunity and continue to grow and develop as a person. So again, just some things to be thinking about that's a little bit longer term, but something to look for in the program, something that you could ask questions in your programs. Where do students land after college? Do students get internships while in this program? Where do they usually go? Do they stay in the States? Do they travel? Do they go abroad? All these different things you could try to think of. And my last point here, again, I'll move out here, is, I'm speaking mostly to high school students or pre-college students, or maybe even parents as well, who have been pushing their kids, who watch this channel, to work very hard and take, 10 AP classes. But you do have to enjoy yourself a little bit, because you will enjoy those memories with your friends in high school, or, just enjoying that time. So don't forget to enjoy yourself. Don't overload yourself with activities just to build up a resume. I think it's good to choose a few activities that you enjoy, some academic and some social or sports or whatever. So I'll move out so you can see, but, make sure you're picking and enjoying a few things that you like. I think that's important to your growth as a person. That's important to your soft skills, if you want to call them, communication and just socializing skills, which is part of the workforce, part of being a student, and so on. So don't, it's a big decision that many folks make about going to university. And if you're watching this, you're probably interested, or again, maybe a parent or someone reflecting on their own experience here. But don't underrate that, because I think those memories might be important. And for some folks, maybe they aren't, right? Maybe you're not enjoying your time in high school, but, all the more reason to kind of vet out your school, think about where you want to be, what kind of career you might want to have. And oftentimes you can look to others to figure that out. So that's just a little bit of my advice. I'll move out of here so you can see here a few things that I've scribbled together. And I hope you folks found that useful. Again, we've talked about master's programs and +1 bachelor degrees and some of these things. So I wanted to reach out to the high school audience and, before I forget, the perspective I had, record a few thoughts here. So if you have other thoughts, other comments, other things that were useful to you as you're selecting things, or questions that you have that I can help answer, or someone in the community, feel free to engage. And with that said, folks, I'll look forward to chatting with you in the next video.